Hello, thank you very much for tuning in. Stuart here, classical record collector. Now, I've been out to some charity shops today. I've not done well. I've got a few records to show you, but it's not really worth doing a whole video just for the paltry 3 records which I bought today. I will show them to you in a moment. But mainly I'm going to be talking about why Kogan, Leonid Kogan, is fetching so much money on Columbia SAX early issues when for Melodia and other recordings he made for other record labels, he fetches hardly anything at all. The same goes for David Oistrakh. David Oistrakh is available on Melodia, Russian Melodia records, as many as you want, plenty of them, and he fetches hardly any money on those records. In fact, he fetches hardly anything also on Deutsche Grammophon, it has to be said. But Columbia SAX early blue silver label, or David Oistrakh or Leonid Kogan can fetch several £1,000s. Why? Well, I'm going to be talking about that because somebody made a comment and I decided to make a video about why I think it is that certain records are fetching so much money. But first of all, yes, I've been out to some charity shops today. I know I've done well on my last few outings. I've done very well and put in little effort to get quite a few records. I put in a lot of effort today and I've come away with hardly anything. That's fair enough. That happens. I visited 2 towns, covered all the charity shops in those towns. Half of the charity shops had records, but I only found 3 records in one charity shop which were really worth buying, and I probably only bought those just to walk away with something. I'd like to say just briefly, I've noticed, and this is true, if you go to a rundown area, if you go to a predominantly underprivileged area, very rundown, and obviously people are hard up, I've noticed that the records are priced quite low, like 50 pence or a pound. But if you go to a fairly touristy kind of place with a historical centre, with nice coffee shops, restaurants, etc., looking very well cared for, the records tend to be priced much higher, like £2, £3, or individually priced, £5, £7, £10, whatever you want. Just something that I've noticed, and I'll probably be focusing on the former, the rundown areas, because I'm actually doing better in those areas, oddly enough, than what you might term sort of affluent areas, where you would think that the quality classical records would come from. And yet I'm doing better in, what shall we say, um, I don't know, sort of industrial kind of towns, ex-mining towns, that sort of thing. Towns that have seen better days. Okay, so let me just move on then. Just say what I've got briefly. I'll just show you what I've got. It's not really much. I did actually find one pop record in one shop I was interested in, Rocking All Over the World, Status Quo, £5. I thought, well, okay. I mean, I could buy that on eBay for probably £7 plus shipping. So I thought, yeah, why not? But I checked the condition and it wasn't good enough. It's a pity because otherwise I would have bought it. So what did I get? This is disappointing. Not much really. So we got Handel, Philips, Universo label, and we've got some concertos there. So Raymond Lepard, excellent conductor of Baroque music. I just fancied having that. It's in absolutely superb condition. The jacket is, virtually near mint. The record itself is a red label, English pressing. That's all right. I think that's a lovely record for £1. I mean, that was a sort of no-brainer for my own collection because I like that kind of record. Probably won't be selling that one, probably. This one, actually, I was quite pleased with. It's a Classics for Pleasure, and it's Christian Ferris playing Lalo Symphony Española for violin and orchestra, and Bruch Violin Concerto No. 1. Now, these are both taken from White Gold ASDs, and this is a really good sort of reissue if you want to listen to those pieces without having to pay the expense of an early issue HMV record. So I'm really pleased with this one, and yeah, okay, nothing more to say about that. Just it's in really good condition. The jacket's great and everything. Here we are, Beethoven Piano Concerto number 4. These cost me £1 each, by the way. Yeah, Beethoven Piano Concerto number 4. Klemperer conducting, and Daniel Barenboim playing the piano at his absolute best as a pianist. The jacket is in superb condition, and the label is the early dog stamp label, and that is the first issue for this particular recording. So somewhere around ASD 2450 we stop seeing the what I call the semicircle dog, and we start seeing the dog stamp, but without the white line that runs around the circumference of the label. So yeah, that is an early dog stamp label, and I don't really think that's worth much money at all, but for £1, certainly that was an obvious record to take. So that's all I got, from today. I've been out walking as well, not just trawling through charity shops, but I didn't get very much. But anyway, still 3 records. Okay, so let's move on to Leonid Kogan and David Oistrakh, etc. Somebody said to me that somebody left a comment because I was talking about Kogan fetching 3,000, 4,000 on the early Columbias, the stereos. Somebody left a comment indicating that, well, the Testament series from the 90s you can buy for a fraction of the price and the sound quality will be as good, so if not better. So if people are chasing high quality sound, they're buying these early Columbias because of that and paying that amount of money, why not just go for a Testament? Okay, let me just clear something up about why. Why is it that the Leonid Kogans and the David Oistrakh, who each one of them made a few recordings each for the Western label Columbia, which I think is owned by EMI, Electrical and Musical Industries, part of the sort of HMV group. They were top Soviet performers. They both won the Queen Elizabeth Prize violin competition, which was held in Belgium every year. Oistrakh won it. And then later on, by the way, I should say Oistrakh did not win it at the first time of trying, because the first time he tried to win it, Ginette Neveu won it. So he tried to win it quite a few times before he eventually did win it. So Oistrakh won that prize, biggest violin prize in the world at that time. And then later on, he persuaded Leonid Kogan to enter. Kogan did enter, and he did win, but I've read somewhere that he said to Oistrakh, don't ever put me forward to take part in a violin competition. Yeah, because Kogan was already a top violinist and he had everything to lose by taking part in that competition. If he did lose, it would tarnish his reputation. And if he did win it, people would say, well, I mean, he's one of the best violinists in the world, maybe even the best violinist in the world. So he's really just done what we all expected to do. But I think that in order to win that prize, Kogan really worked extremely hard, and he didn't want to put himself forward in that kind of position again. So yeah, Kogan and Oistrakh obviously were extremely well known in the West, very well respected, and I understand that they were invited by Columbia UK to record certain seminal works such as the Tchaikovsky Concerto, the Beethoven Concerto, the Brahms Concerto, some Mozart, and maybe one or two other really important works. So they didn't make that many records compared with Menuhin and Heifetz, other performers. And they also made these recordings on the absolute top labels that cost the absolute most amount of money. They were really expensive for people to buy. I think in today's money, to buy one of those records in today's money would be something silly like 150 or 200 pounds. It were extremely expensive. Because of that, they were pressed in relatively small numbers. And obviously, because of that, they're fairly rare. There are not many of them around. Compound that with the fact that many of the styluses that people were using in those days were actually what we called blunderbuss styluses which are tracking at your really heavy weights and not really such good quality styli. That a lot of people were using. Some were using better styluses, but a lot of those records got played on poor quality equipment. So there are very few copies around which are in sort of VG plus EX condition. So we've got this rarity thing. There aren't many around in the first place. There are even fewer around in good condition. And if you think that the jacket's got to be in good condition and the record as well, there really aren't that many around. Now, let's think about Kogan and Oistrakh both recording in huge numbers for both Melodia. Well, Melodia, the national record label of the Soviet Union. I lived in Russia for a year. I lived in St. Petersburg. I was buying records as well, collections when I was living there. In the year 2000, 2001, I was going into shops and their records are absolutely everywhere. And at first I thought, wow, there's a Kogan, there's an Oistrakh, fantastic. I'm going to make big money out of this. And then I found out that these Melodias were really selling for just normal amounts of money, like, sort of £4 or £5, that sort of money. When at that time, a good blue silver Kogan was selling for maybe £300 or £400. Of course, now it's £3,000, but in those days, 300 or 400 is like sort of 800 now. So yeah, I realized quickly, well, okay, there are reasons why the Kogans and the Oistrachs are fetching big money on Columbia, and they're fetching little money. There's the scarcity element, that they're in plentiful supply on Melodia. There are loads of them around, no problems at all. And then there's the fact that Kogan and Oistrakh just made a few recordings each on British Columbia, and they didn't really seem to make recordings for any other labels. Okay, now I know that Oistrakh made some recordings for Deutsche Grammophon. His recordings on Deutsche Grammophon don't really fetch that much money. There are a couple of reasons there. One is that they were pressed in really large numbers, in Germany and in the UK. So the obvious one is Oistrakh playing with his son Igor. He's playing the Bach double concerto and some other Bach on a DG, and even in an absolute early label, Perfect Condition, that's only fetches about £25. That record is so incredibly common, and that's the thing, that the Columbias are incredibly uncommon. It's not the sound quality, right? Okay, it's a combination of things. Yes, they sound really good. They probably sound as good as any records did at that particular time. Early stereos. They were made to a very, very high standard. Yes, that's true. But people are not buying them and putting those premiums on them because, wow, this is fantastic sound quality. Because if it was Menuhin playing on that same record, it would not really be worth very much money at all. But it's the fact that these top Soviet performers came over and made those recordings, and there aren't many of them around. And there's a lot of value attached to those particular performers playing on that particular label. That's the main thing, and that it's stereo. It's not so much that the sound quality is amazing, and I wouldn't really say that it's amazing. It's really good for the time period. So yeah, let's just clear that up. It's not the sound quality. It is the fact that it's stereo. Yes, that's true. And the performer and the label and the scarcity and the repertoire. Because if these records were like, I don't know, let's say Schnittke Violin Concerto, or let's say, I don't know, I don't know, some obscure 19th century composer, Rubra, no, so the 20th century Rubra Violin Concerto, or something like that. But it's the canonical works. It's Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto, Beethoven, Brahms. These are the greatest concertos ever written. And that's what makes them so valuable. Great music, great performer, great label, scarcity in good condition, in any condition scarcity, but even greater that finding these in good condition is even harder. There are just so few of them around. But there's another added thing as well. That's the That's the kudos that these records have acquired, in the same way that maybe certain wines in wine collecting are now undrinkable, but these bottles have got so much, these particular, I don't know, champagnes or Bordeaux or whatever, have got so much kudos in the collecting world. There's this sort of added sort of mystique to them and desirability. And they kind of seduced buyers into wanting to bid lots of money for them. There's a confidence in them, which is really probably not that different to the confidence in, say, Picasso or Van Gogh, that kind of thing, where people are seeing them as an investment, that this is such a collectible item. And this confidence has built up and it's perpetuating. And that's why we're seeing these really high prices. And when I look at Coggins selling for £3,000, I think, well, that's a bad investment. I could be wrong, because that same record in 10 years could be selling for £10,000, and it might well do. So I hope that what I've said about why these records are fetching big money is sinking in, and that it makes sense. I think that what I've said is more or less correct, but if any of you guys, if any of my viewers and subscribers have got any added comments about it, obviously I'd be delighted to hear them. But just to add that obviously the reissues of these records on, I don't know, 180 gram vinyl or whatever in the 20th century, the Testaments, forget it. They're not worth anything, or they're worth hardly anything. Forget it. You're not buying them for the sound quality. It's the same thing as antiques, why you would buy a Chippendale as opposed to a copy made maybe 50 or 60 years later. It's original, it's unique, it's highly desirable, it's got a reputation, it's got kudos, all of these things, which is making it really desirable and really collectible. Okay, well, that's all I've got to say for now. Hope you enjoyed that video, and I look forward to your comments. Goodbye for now.